the center of a lot of people's mental health struggles is this process of going over and over and over and over and over something.
But I noticed when I put those parameters around it, it felt a lot more than what it probably was or even needed to be. This time, I'm just like, I have no clue, and I'm not putting any pressure on myself. And it has been insanely freeing, but I don't really know why.
Isolation and alienation is becoming a growing problem among men, especially young men.
Jett Stone. The story I'm telling myself is when you were picking up the ladies back in the day, that had to be a pretty cool name to say. Come on, man.
You might be right, but it's also easily confused with Jeff Stone, and sometimes sometimes Jeff is just so much easier. You just go with that, and you just let it ride.
Yeah, I've always. I mean, the audience is so sick of me hearing saying this, but like, dude, like that. If one thing I could change about my own life, it would be like I'd give myself a cool name. I'm named after my dad. My dad jokes with me. He's like, "It was your mom's idea. I want to name you Jason. Like, I didn't want you to have my name." And I've joked with my mom in the past, but like, did you just not want me to have a date for prom? Was that really what it was all about? Because there's not many people under the age of 70 with my name, but
yep. Well, you're right. That's a whole nother episode. You got to have the psychology of naming your kid and the impact it has on their lives. There's a lot there.
So where'd your parents come up with the name Jett?
I put it on my mom. I think she was the originator. And there was a movie, I think it was with James Dean, maybe in the 50s or 60s, I might be getting that wrong, where there was a character named Jett. He was a villain. And I think it was just in her subconscious. And when she was going to, thinking of names, that came out, and she just went with it. I think my dad kind of was like, all right, we'll do it. She's a zany person. She's, she's a hippie. So she had to go creative with it.
Yeah. That's cool though, man. That's really cool. My oldest son, Ethan, my wife and I started dating in 1996, and that's when Mission Impossible was out with Tom Cruise, and Ethan Hunt was his name.
Yep.
And we went to go see that. I was like, Ethan, that's a cool name. My wife was like, I was thinking the same. And you never hear the name Ethan ever. And then in 2006, when my son Ethan was born, it was like the second most popular name that year. So there's a lot of Ethans out there now.
Yes. It's a lot of pressure naming your kid.
Yeah.
When we were looking for names for our kids, one of the things that I started to do was look at the credits at the end of a movie. Of like, just because it floods you with names, and a lot of them are so interesting because they're working in the arts, and so like you can kind of like brainstorm in that way just by looking at the credits at the end of like a show or a movie, come up with a lot of ideas.
I have never met anybody else who does that, so I do that too. Yeah. Like I've often like, well, let me see what kind of fascinating names are out there, or like the last and the first and last name put together, like, why would they make that combination? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear you, man. That's cool.
And if you're a production assistant, think about it. Like you're probably a little more zany, artsy, and so maybe your parents were, and chances are there's a name that, just is off the beaten path.
That's wild, man. That's cool. So tell me, so you're a girl dad, right? You have an 8-year-old, and you said 4.5-year-old. Is that correct?
That's right. 4.5 and 8.5.
All right.
Preschool and 3rd grade.
So going after more? Or are we stopping with 2 girls?
I think it's fair to say that we're stopping here. We're going to count our blessings, and I know you have 4. It's intimidating to think about. We have a dog now, which is an added element to our life that neither my wife nor I were ever like raised with dogs, but now we have a dog named Stanley. So we've got a little dude in the house who's bringing that energy.
Well, he probably wants like a sibling himself. We have a Bernie. I'm happy to ship him up to you.
I think we got our hands full. I appreciate it. Yeah. Appreciate the thought.
Dude, this is the worst dog we've ever had. Ever.
Really?
Ever. And it's for like one reason only. So like we got him as a puppy. He's a Bernedoodle. So he's a Bernese Mountain Dog Poodle mix. Had no idea that and we got him because we wanted a dog that was hypoallergenic. And my wife like loves Bernese Mountain Dogs. And we're like, oh, well, let's get a Bernedoodle. Had no idea that there's this thing between an what's called an F1 Bernedoodle and an F2.
Hmm.
Had no idea. But basically, one sheds and one doesn't. And we got the one that sheds. Had no idea
Hmm.
that there were two different ones. We're like, oh, it's a Bernedoodle. Nope. And then on top of that, he likes to piss everywhere.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
this dog, like I love dogs. I've had dogs. But like it's taken me everything not to take this dog in the backyard and just shoot him, because like this dog has pissed on people. He's pissed
Yep.
on my kids' girlfriends. He's pissed on our couch. And somehow, some way, like my kids convinced me to keep him,
Yep.
even though like we're the ones who take care of him. But like, I'm not kidding. Like one of these days my kids are going to come home and be like, yeah, he just didn't come home. Like I'm kidding. I would never do that to my
I
children. Like
know.
we're
Yeah.
just we're grinning and bearing it. You know, I'm getting him a trainer, and hopefully we can break this dog of that. But
Oh yeah, that's what you got to do. You have to learn to train them, and we're I can't speak to that because we're
yeah,
struggling.
I hear you, man. Oh, well, how old is Stanley?
Stanley's pushing 8 months,
Okay,
so
so
he's
you're
a
in it.
puppy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've dislocated my shoulder I feel what feels like 1,000 times with him. Not literally, but like
Oh,
just they get the zoomies. They're just all on and off. They're all over the place, and so
and
a
what
lot.
kind
It's
is
a
he?
lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
It's a Cavapoo, so it's King Charles Cavalier mixed with a uh, a small poodle, mini poodle.
Okay.
Yeah,
Everybody's doing this poodle thing, this poodle mix
they
thing.
are.
But
It's
yeah.
in.
You've been married 12 years too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I have a question for you. I've been dying to ask a guest who is
Sure.
a therapist, but I've never asked this question, shockingly, for as many therapists we've had on. But has your wife ever said, I feel really self-conscious telling you this because I just feel like you're analyzing me? Do you ever get that?
In the beginning,
Yeah.
yes. Um, in the beginning, I think there was some insecurity around that, but I get that with sometimes with friends, colleagues outside my work life, um, and I had to put a kibosh to it in my own marriage, just because I felt like it derailed whatever conversation, whatever conflict we were having, and assigning me with powers that I don't necessarily have. Do you know? So like
Yeah. Yeah.
as a husband, I am listening to her with a much different filter
Right.
and lens than I am with, let's say, a patient.
Yeah.
Um, and I listening to a friend, listening to a spouse is different than listening to a patient. Because
Hmm.
with a patient, you have like everything is filtered through a conceptualization of who that person is. And it's different. And so am I psychoanalyzing people all the time? Am I psychoanalyzing my wife? No. But at first she probably mentioned it a few times and I just made a point of saying like it means a lot to me to be just a complex human like anyone else. I'm not trying to be a therapist. I think sometimes that can come on when we're talking through things. I might use a term that's, you know, a little bit like psychobabble or something. But it has come up much less so with my wife, but it continually comes up in my everyday life. Sometimes for some people, it's intimidating. And for other people, they want to share everything. They want to unload everything on you. Like, oh, my aunt was depressed or this or this, and then other people um, have therapists in their life, and they're just like, yeah, you're just a regular dude with all the same problems that everyone else.
Yeah, I was always, yeah, I'm just curious about that. Like, how does that show up in marriages, right? When we see these relationship dynamics and like turn it on, turn it off type thing, the filter you're talking about, like I totally get it. Um, I I'm really excited to talk about what we're going to talk about on today's topic. You have a brand new book out called Quiet Your Mind. And I would love for you to just share what was the catalyst of writing that book? Like when you started thinking about the next book, why that one? It's fascinating.
Yeah, so the book is Quiet Your Mind, a men's guide. And it is an outgrowth of my blog at Psychology Today. It's a pop psychology magazine and website. And this opportunity to write a book, a guidebook specifically, with practical, actionable tools um, aimed at a male audience, came from my blog, which is called Souls of Men, and I write about a number of different topics. on that blog. And so I was approached by the publisher, Penguin Random House, to write a guidebook for an audience of men who are, you know, typing in searches about overthinking. Overthinking was kind of a keyword, a buzzword that a lot of men were looking up, and so they were looking for an expert to write a guidebook. And based on the topics that I talked about in my blog, they presented this to me, and I thought it was an awesome opportunity to share some of the science-backed tools that I've picked up, collected over my time as a psychologist. And one of the biggest challenges with this book was translating a lot of research psychology into just concrete, practical tools that could take anywhere from 30 seconds to 25 minutes to do. And the other thing that was interesting to me was that the ask was that I address overthinking. And overthinking is a word that we use every day in our language. You hear it, you're overthinking your tennis serve. You're overthinking your yoga move. You're overthinking that text from your girlfriend. But you're also overthinking something traumatic that happened to you too. So it's extremely a versatile word. It's in our language. It's a safe entryway into deeper seated psychological issues. So I loved that idea. Okay, what is overthinking? And so that's what the book does. It's chapter 1's about creating calm. Chapter 2 is about managing stress. 3 is about time management, and 4 is taking perspective. And these are all just different angles on how to tackle overthinking and the anxiety or depression that could come from it. And so this book is short and sweet and to the point. And my aim here was really to speak directly to men. There's a lot of books out there, wonderfully so, that are talking to women and the issues that they face. And I think the time has come in our culture where we need to welcome men into this space and use examples that reflect things that are happening in their life.
Is taking things to I picked up on this, but I think I did anyway. But overthinking is taking a situation, an experience, a perspective, and going to the extreme with it, like just going too far over the line with it.
It can be. Overthinking is, well, I'll give you the academic term for it. Overthinking
Perfect.
is we call repetitive negative thinking.
Oh,
And what it
okay.
is some combination of worry and rumination.
Can you
And
can you explain the difference between those two as well?
sure,
Okay.
they are cognitive processes. And worry tends to be more focused on the future. It is modeling out scenarios and dealing with the ambiguity of what comes next or what might happen. So from a temporal standpoint, it's more future leaning. You're trying to handle the ambiguity of not knowing, which can lead to anxiety. So worry is the cognitive process, and it tends to be unwanted, unproductive, unrelenting. And rumination is more backwards looking. It's more focused on history.
Got
It's
it.
digging for insight.
Okay.
And so it tends to be passive. It tends to be focused on your self-worth. And the two happen oftentimes. It's kind of hard to tell which is which. Am I worrying? Am I ruminating? But what research scientists have found is that the process is often the same. It's repetitive, passive, difficult to control, and oftentimes, and mostly, the content is negative. The difference between worry and rumination is really just worry is a little more focused in the future, and the rumination is more on the past. But they show up across psychological issues, meaning that what we would call overthinking in everyday language, whether we call repetitive negative thinking or perseverative cognition, whatever, it shows up across psychological issues like obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, depressive disorders, addiction. So what the research has found is that at the center of a lot of people's mental health struggles is this process of going over and over and over and over and over something. So overthinking can look like, I like the analogy of kneading dough, right? You're just constantly going over this thing. Why did I send that text? Oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. Like, I can't believe I sent that. I should have waited till the second date, or, whatever it is. And overthinking can also take the form of just totally chaotic. Like, I was joking in the beginning about my puppy, like having the zoomies. It's like jumping from this to that to this to that to this to that. It's like scattered. You can't fall asleep. Oftentimes can oftentimes happen at night. That's actually how my overthinking shows up. It's like scatter. I'm just leaping from one thing to the next. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't quiet it. Um, so it takes many different shapes too, but that's the gist of overthinking.
Got it. I've heard that, anxiety is worry that's focused on the future. Depression is focused on the past. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've heard. But going back to this, does the worry come before the anxiety, or does the anxiety, is it there that causes the worry?
That's such a good question, and I think there's no good answer to that other than it's bidirectional, which means that, like,
Okay.
worry creates feelings of anxiety, and feelings of anxiety kicks up more worry. And
Oh,
so
wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
it's it's very hard to say where it starts. Like, on an individual level, if I'm working with a patient, I could probably break down of where the triggers are. But that's really important, actually, to dealing with overthinking, is knowing what sets it off.
Right. Okay.
Um, and anywhere there's overthinking, there's something that you usually deeply care about.
So
And so,
something that's very important to us is what you're saying.
yes,
Situations, loved ones, something like that. Security, certainty.
yeah, yes, that there's like deeper stuff that lives beneath the overthinking, that we can't just like put up a stop sign and say, stop it. No, because there's other um, deeper seated factors at play, whether it's your sense of belonging, your orientation in the world, your competence. Um, and so part of this book was, one of the skills is helping to identify what the yearning that lives beneath your overthinking. Um, my overthinking tends to be like, I really want to get things right for people. I'm a perfectionist in that way, like even in my writing, and that, like, that comes from a place of like wanting to be competent. And if I can remind myself of that, it like slows the speed of it. Because, like, reminding yourself, everyone overthinks, or almost everyone overthinks to some degree, and that if you could get grounded with it, it's really one of the ways out. But we could talk more on that.
This is probably the most in depth I've ever heard this topic, and it's fascinating to me. Um, since we're on this topic and we're talking about overthinking, we're talking about worry and rumination, I want to ask you one other thing from
Sure.
obviously all your expertise and your credentials and study. So just to take I don't know how to describe this other than like situational. So like, let's just say, um, we have a bad moment with our kids, right? We blow up at them, and then we're just like, we're upset at the fact that they did whatever it is that they did, but then we're upset at ourselves for acting the way that we did. And then on top of it, we also have this feeling, or this voice of like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, you should be better than this. Come on, man. Like, you
Yep.
know what I mean? It's almost like these layers of frustration that go 2 and 3 deep. So what is that?
That is you. You could call that some form of overthinking, right? If we get into the specifics of whatever it is. But there's something in there that you really care about. Like, you wouldn't go to all those different layers jumping around if you weren't invested in
That makes
being a
sense.
good father. Because I could tell you what, I've worked with people who aren't invested in being a good father, and they aren't jumping through all those hoops. And so, first things first is like, if you're in the muck of parenting, if you're in the trenches, you are probably overthinking. And women disproportionately took on that burden, which is why they were considered the worry warts for so long, because they were doing all the caregiving and worrying and what we now call the mental load. But now it's like, here we are, here you are, right? Like creating a podcast on this because it's an outgrowth of maybe your overthinking on how to be a good dad, right? You're asking the question. And so I think when you ask the question of how can I be better in what I do, you're going to slip into a ditch of overthinking, at least from time to time. It comes from like a, a decent place.
Comes from a place of you, like you said, you care about it, right? Because just as you said that, as obvious as that probably should be, there are situations and things that happen to us probably on the daily, and you're like, I don't even give that a second thought.
Yeah.
Like it's just like
Yes.
whatever, right? But
Yeah.
when it comes to like certain things that we're talking about, your marriage, your kids, the connection, communication, good moments, bad moments, it's like, man, we deeply, deeply care about and if there's a man listening to this show, he deeply cares. So we understand. I now understand that. That makes a lot of sense. Um, this overthinking thing. So you let me ask you this.
Hmm.
Um, I have a son who actually identifies as I'm an overthinker.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, and I took a ton of notes as you were talking about it. I was like, I can I can definitely see that. And my wonderful advice to him, because it's awesome, right? Is dude, don't worry so much, which is ridiculous. But the thing is like I'm sitting here thinking like I'm not exactly sure what that means to him. I'm not exactly sure what that even means to me. And I remember people telling me like it's not that big of a deal, just don't worry about it, which is terrible advice because it doesn't work. So like if
Yep.
somebody like let's just take a dad who either he identifies as like I'm an overthinker, or maybe as a kid it's just like God bless, like dad, I just keep overthinking, or I'm an overthinker. I don't is it pretty harmful for us to have that part of our identity? Should or should not?
You know, having it as part of your identity, it's always hard for me to read that because
Yeah.
ever since I wrote this book, I've heard people say I'm an overthinker. I'm an underthinker. Like, am I an overthinker? Like, if there's such a range of responses. I do think that there are people who are more prone to overthinking. Um, in that way, it's a little bit more of a trait, like a cognitive style of like handling something, like just like bum rush it with thoughts, like like attack it from every angle. Like it's over. It's being, um, it's like being a critical thinker on steroids in some ways for some people. And so if your son is like, um, I'm an overthinker, and you're telling him stop worrying, you're right. It's like it's like that tends not to be effective because um, it can make him worry more. The first thing you can do is probably normalize it. Like, yeah, we worry, and that's okay. That this isn't something that's unique to you. We go through it as humans. It's more of a human thing than it is some, secret problem that you have. I think as a kid, I felt that. I felt like I was alone in my overthinking. I was like, oh my gosh, I go over things way more than other people. Like I must have some problem. I think one of the best places to approach, let's say your son, um, is to think about, well, what are the triggers? Just talk to him, because one of the things that keeps overthinking going is that it's kind of vague and critical. And that's probably the most important piece of research I could share, is that rumination and worry, which is overthinking, is oftentimes abstract, meaning, "Ah, I'm the worst wrestler ever. I'm the worst, you know, math student ever. Like, I can't believe I fucked that up or I did this wrong." It's like it's not grounded in who you are. It's not grounded in your values or the things that you want or your unmet needs. And so taking whatever it is that they're overthinking about and translating it into something meaningful to them is important. So if every time you get ready for your game, you're just racked with uncertainty and worry and overthinking, what about the game makes you feel that way? Like, what specifically? Because I know for me as a former athlete, a lot of times it was like, I'm going to get, my coaches are just going to, you know, bench me again.
Yeah.
Like, I had an issue with authority as a kid. For another person, it's like, I'm not living up to the standard that a parent sets for me as being a D1 athlete like my dad was. For another one, it's like, oh, I'm going to be rejected by the team if I'm not playing well. It's just, it's different. And so you have to sort of nail down what is the trigger. In psychology and therapy, at least, we call it like a functional analysis, meaning that um, like what is the context and the function of your overthinking? Meaning the context is, let's say, sports. I'm talking about with your kid. The function is to protect them. Overthinking is a habit, and it's also a way of what we call experiential avoidance, running away from feelings, running away from fear, running away from failure, embarrassment, shame. And so when you identify the trigger, what you can then do is say, okay, I know why a little more I'm overthinking. I'm trying to flee this emotion, or I'm trying to flee this potential outcome. Then we have a start, because then you could talk to them about that, and then you're more narrowed in.
So when we're overthinking, the context is most likely the situation, but the reason we're overthinking is there's probably some looming consequence that we're worried about, whether it's your coach benching you, whether it's, well, if I get pinned, we're the only match out here. There's a spotlight, like everybody in the fans sees me, all my team sees me lose, like everybody sees me lose. If I lose, what does that mean for my next match? That kind of thing. So it's all these things that we're thinking about that are more consequential, and maybe it's going to be an
Yes,
impact on us, correct?
that's right. And
Okay.
we're talking a little more worry there, which
Right.
is a big one. But with rumination, it's like you're looking back at something, let's say, after the game, after your
Oh,
son's
okay.
game, let's say. And that's a different variation of overthinking. Now you're starting to ruminate over,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
like, that it feels, I like to think of worry as it's uncertain and it feels like it's controllable.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like rumination is different because there's a certainty to it, and it is uncontrollable. Meaning that you're looking back and you're like, in this case with rumination, like, oh, I know my coach thought like I played poorly. There's no doubt about it. And there's nothing I can do about it. It's uncontrollable. Whereas like when you're looking into the future, you're like, well, maybe I could do this or that or this or that. It feels like it's something that you could, if you just do enough modeling out and predicting, that you could get the right answer and figure out how to protect yourself from whatever danger or threat is out there.
So like maybe like a good example of rumination would be like something kind of horrific, maybe embarrassing. Like I'll share this with you real quick because
Sure.
like this was the year before my wife and I got married. This was in 2002. I'll never forget this. And the reason I'll never forget this is because everyone in my wife's family and extended family for the past 23 years has never let me forget it. And we did a progressive dinner with her and her
Hmm.
entire extended family. We went to like 5 houses, and I got hammered drunk off wine,
Hmm.
like hammered. And I was up to the point, I think, in the past 30 years, I've thrown up over alcohol, call it 3 times. Like I don't
Okay.
really drink a whole lot, but on this particular occasion, drank way too much wine, way too fast, didn't eat enough, absolute disaster, drunk, embarrassing. Like I didn't do anything crazy, crazy, but everybody knew that I was drunk. And then what I did is I was just like, oh my God, like I feel terrible. And we were at my wife's cousin's house. I went upstairs and I'm like, I seriously need to lay down. Like I don't feel well. I laid down, I passed out, and then I woke up to this urgent feeling of like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up. And I was so drunk that I could not literally stand up and get out of the bed. I dropped off the bed and I tried to roll to the trash can, and I just puked
Oh,
all over her blanket, all over her carpet. Like it was a mess, and it was red wine, and people came up, they're like, oh my God. Like actually people thought I was puking up blood, and they're like, oh my God. And I was just a total mess. And then the next morning, like I had to wake up, and I was like, I looked at my wife. Well, she was my fiance at the time. I was like,
hmm.
oh, I will never, ever be able to face your family again, like ever. And like, dude, I was dreading hanging out with her
Yep.
family again. And all they did was bust my ass over it. Like they totally busted, like laughing, busted my chops. I seriously thought I like ruined everything. I'm like, I'm gonna have to go find another fiance. Like I'm kicked out. And I was like, just finally, like, after I was like beating myself up relentlessly, I think it was my wife's mom. It was like, sweetheart, I'm one of six kids, and we have 28 first cousins in this family, and like I did my fair share of partying. You don't think we haven't seen this in the past? Like, come on, like everything's cool. Like, if in fact we're just going to give you shit about it for the next 30 years, which that's what they've done. But like I thought, like, dude, I thought I'd be kicked out of the family after that. But like I was just beating myself up relentlessly over that. Like, so that's the kind of rumination you're talking about, where it's like it could be a moment like that. You just relentlessly beat yourself up, and life will never be the same, and everything's gonna be disastrous.
Yes. I mean, that's such a powerful anecdote. I feel like I want to take that one on the road with me to use, because it's not just rumination. And the way you describe it too is like a lot of guys that, the way that they uniquely ruminate is they beat the shit out of themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
They have an inner critic that is just like a harsh bully. And so not only did you beat yourself up about what you did, but then you zoomed out to the future. So you were in rumination mode, but then you also zoomed out to the future, like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to, when she dumps me, I'm gonna go have to find a new person to live with. I'm gonna have to change my this, that, so you're time traveling here.
yeah,
And then what's great is that the thing that helped soothe your rumination is that was another person who
yeah,
came in and was like, dude, you're going to be okay. Like, we love you still. That you're still loved.
yeah.
Not to be overly sentimental about it, but that is true that one of the ways to pull yourself out of an overthinking loop is to have good people in your life. It's not this solitary, like, grind it out, tough it out thing that's going to get you out of overthinking. Having good relationships, as you apparently do, good choice, by the way. Um,
I married up.
yes, that, like, yeah, like when you think about this through attachment, having a secure attachment foundation to fall back on, like, helps you get out of an overthinking loop. That's why it's a great example, because it encompasses so much of what overthinking is.
That makes total sense to me. I am curious though. Yes, community, yes, reassurance from others, the love, the acceptance and stuff like that. Like I look back on it now and I laugh. In fact, I try to always beat my extended family to jokes before they get to me, because they still joke about it. But we all laugh about it. But what if you don't have that? Like what if you're just sort of idle there with your own thoughts, and maybe the thing that you're ruminating on or you're overthinking on, you haven't even shared with anybody else. You're just like, oh my God, this is just in my head. Like, what do I do with it?
Hmm. You bring up an important point in that, and as you know, with all the guests you've had on your show, that isolation and alienation is um, becoming a growing problem among men, especially young men. And so one of the things that's happening is that in the face of loneliness, isolation, is that we turn to our phones, right? There's
Yes.
screens when we're alone. That's a form of avoidance, and it can be a form of pleasure too. It could be healthy, but a lot of times it's a form of experiential avoidance. You're fleeing something and you're just going to video games, screen, porn. And so if you're not doing that, then you're stuck with yourself, just you, yourself, and your mind. And if you're a young man with, you know, pent up rage or aggression potentially, you're going to start turning that on yourself. You're going to start turning that anger inward. And so it is a problem that there is isolation, and there are men out there who don't have, you know, readily accessible loved ones like you did. And the cop out answer is find some community, right? And that's easier said than done, or go into therapy or coaching. Um, the thing that I would actually tell most of those young men is to start with find some sort of team, find a league, um, find a martial arts gym, But there are tools, and my book provides those tools too. So, you know, my book isn't a cure-all, right? Like there are bigger issues at play in some of the situations where men are alone, but learning breathing. Breathing is a great way to slow down overthinking if you don't have someone to talk to right away. The mind-body connection. So when you're in overthinking mode, your autonomic nervous system is activated. You're potentially in a fight, flight, or freeze state. Blood's rushing to your extremities, your heart's racing faster, your hands can get clammy. Start by learning some effective breathing methods, whether it's box breathing or cyclic sigh or mindfulness techniques, just to get more comfortable with yourself. Because a lot of the addictions out there are a lack of comfort being with yourself.
So glad you said that, because that was exactly what I was going to ask. Because, I mean, we all have history with this, right? I mean, like when you're uncomfortable with a situation, your thoughts, you're stressed out, you're overwhelmed. Like I remember, and I still fall into this. I mean, luckily, like for me, like I've given up porn. I gave that up a long time ago. I don't drink alcohol. But what I will do is I leverage fitness, or I'll go for a walk. I know those things are positive, but to be honest, I think there's a part of me that probably takes that even a bit too far, because
Mm.
I will use it to replenish and energize, but I'll also use it to escape sometimes, to just get out of that mode of like, I'll just go for a walk so I don't have to
Yep.
think about it. Or I'll go for a walk because I'm like maybe even trying to avoid it, or go work out or something like that. But the thing that I've always had the hardest time with, and I think I speak for a lot of dudes out there, is sitting in that discomfort with my emotions. Cause I'm like, I'll sit there and I'll be like, all right, I'm gonna do some deep breathing. And I'm like, nope. You know what I mean? I'm just, there's a part of me that just like doesn't want to sit there with it. But I know that that is essential. But like,
Yes.
I've never really learned like, here's how you sit with it and actually sort of be okay with it. I'd
Yes.
love to know that.
Let me just start by saying I'm no mindfulness expert. I am like you. I'm a fidgety guy. Once I start breathing, I can't do. I've struggled with mindfulness beyond 5 minutes, and I work with my patients where they are, or work with them. They have no idea what mindfulness is. It's more about returning to the thing, meaning that if it's the breath, if you're working on your breath, you're winning if you're getting distracted and then returning to your breath. It's in the return where you're doing the thing. It's not this sort of, you're in this, you know, peaceful mindset where no thoughts are coming and like you've achieved, the optimal state of like,
Extreme
of being
Zen.
right.
Yeah.
I think if we reframe it as like, can you practice a form of mindfulness where sometimes it's called focused attention mindfulness. I find it can be really helpful with guys. Is one of the skills in the book is listening to music, right? A song, let's say, um, bluegrass, and you're closing your eyes, and maybe you're doing some breathing, and you're just tracking the bassist, just the bass. You're focusing, and your mind's going to wander because that's what minds do. But then you're going to bring it back to that, to the bassist. It's a way of training your attention and getting yourself out of overthinking mode. And it's less time consuming than like, sitting on a mat for half an hour. And I call it micro mindfulness. Maybe someone else has used that term. I'm not really sure. But it's like little moments like that throughout the day where even if it's 30 seconds before a meeting, 30 seconds here, a minute there, where you're just focusing your breath or focusing on, in this case, like music, but it's activating your senses. You could do it with smell, you could do it with taste, you could do it with sight. And taking off the burden of just doing it right, or the amount of time that mindfulness can take, can be really effective for people.
Gosh, that's such. Do you find this guys being like, it's almost like they want to perfect that, and if they can't perfect it, they just don't want to do it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
All
that's
the
what
time.
I.
All the time.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know if I was the only one that felt that way. I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, like, and I get distracted, is it all for nothing? You know what I mean? versus
No.
like going through a few reps or just being like, I'm like, what, I don't know, like even like, could you view it somewhat similar as like how I'm viewing drinking right now? So like, I haven't drank for almost 7 months. I gave it up, quite frankly. There was nothing bad that was going on. Like my wife and I and my kids went on a cruise. We got off the cruise ship, and that was the first time I think ever in my life I drank for 8 straight days. And it wasn't a lot. It was like 3 drinks, 4 drinks. I think one day I had 5, but it wasn't,
Hmm.
and they were spread out. So it wasn't like I was getting hammered or anything, but like I got off that cruise ship and I don't know what it was. If you ever just ate something, drank something, and you did it so much, you're like, I can, or you threw up over it and you're like, I can never eat that or drink that again. But like I
Yeah.
got off that ship and I was like, the very thought of like having alcohol right now just sounds repulsive to me.
Yep.
And I was just like, I'll probably just take a break for like a couple weeks or whatever and just, but like the more I was away from it, the more like I was repulsed by it. And I'm just like, but here's my stance on it. So many people have asked me like, are you going to be like, you never drink again? I was like, I don't know. And they're like, well, are you going to go back to it? I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, well, what's your plan with it? I was like, I have no idea. All I know is like, I just don't want to do it right now. So I just don't. And is it maybe just kind of like easing back into it? Like it doesn't have to be this or that. It could just be like whatever it is.
I love that because it takes the pressure
Yeah.
off of like you're implementing some big regime into your life that you have to live by and that you're going to let other people down if you fail it. Like, is he off the
Yeah.
wagon or on the wagon?
Yeah.
Um, I can't tell you how often I come across it, even in my clinical work, where I mean, it started with mindfulness, but we could even talk about this in relation to sobriety or any drinking or substance use. Is it make it work for you? Like, um, the problem with dry January or these sort of time stamped, um, you know, routines that people do is that it's confined to the time when other people are doing it as well. And like you're held accountable. Other people are doing it. It's dry January. It's socially acceptable. But where the rubber meets the road is when you do it for yourself. You know, you don't have to justify it to anyone else. You're like, this is making my life better. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to be sober for the rest of my life, but right now it's effective and it's private. I don't need to like, it could be helpful to share it with someone else that you're on that journey. That's fine, but it's not performative. It's not like this big thing that you're doing, and that I think that could be really effective for people. And so keep with it. Is my suggestion to you. Make it your own.
Is that to say too, could you use some of that same approach to overthinking? You know, I'm going because let me
Yeah.
explain for just 1 second. So like,
Hmm.
I've noticed, so like I think it was 2016, me and I think it was, and then we also did this in 2020, from 2022 October to 2023 October, me and 21 other guys, we were like, let's go a year without alcohol just to do it.
Hmm.
And, but it was like that, those bookends of like the start and the finish that just, it felt heavy to me. And then I did it. I also took a year off alcohol in 2016 just to see if I could do it. And it was like the same thing. It was like these bookends of like, it's got to be
Yes.
this. And I got to admit, like when I was doing things like that, I, I felt pressure. It felt like some heaviness, maybe worry or whatever. But, but I noticed when I put those parameters around it, it felt a lot more than what it probably was or even needed to be. This
Hmm.
time I'm just like, I have no clue and I'm not putting any pressure on myself. And it has been insanely freeing, but I don't really know why.
There's something lighter to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not squeezing it as tightly and straining yourself
Right.
with the goal. Um, the metaphor is like holding the bat lightly with a goal, and it ends up working for you.
Yeah.
Um, I love the idea of just to see if I can do it, just for your own challenge. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to put it. And so with overthinking, it does. I wanted to just get to that because I think you're onto something. Is that I wrote this book, and it isn't. It's a template, meaning that my hope is that people read it and they integrated into their unique lives. One of the most one of the things that isn't talked about enough in just sort of tools for stress, anxiety, overthinking is being playful with it, like finding your own um, idiosyncratic tools. I'll give you an example of that. I went into, you know what Dolly is like? There's a text to image AI.
I, I've
Basically,
I've heard about it, but I've never like
yeah,
yeah.
the tools now are, you could basically type in something and it'll generate an AI image of it. So what I did was I typed in what I imagined my inner critic to be, some variation of an old hockey coach, like sort of like berating, and it generated an image. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like kind of what that looks like. I printed it out. I have it literally right here. And it's externalized from me now, right? This pressure during my overthinking to like to be a perfectionist, to get it right, to it kind of relates to authority in some way. I see it here. It's less intimidating. It's um, in psychology we call diffusion. I'm diffused, like it's not fused within me. It's diffused. It's external. I can see it, and it's less powerful. It's less believable. And so I took that as just a creative tool myself to deal with my own overthinking. And it's in the book now. I edited that into the book. But I'm just giving that example because it's quirky. It's kind of weird, honestly. But I carry this scary image that's no longer so scary, and it's outside of me as opposed to inside me. So it's just an example of sort of making it your own.
Is there any way I'm and I don't want to pry because this is your personal life, but
Sure.
would you mind showing it? I would love to see this thing because now you got me curious. I want to go do this and see what comes up for me because I think men are very, very visual. Holy crap, dude! The guy looks terrifying. What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! So like, what do you feel when you see that?
It defangs my inner critic because there's a lot more to that picture than just what you might see in the
Sure.
visual. It looks like it the sort of figures in my life that still from my history that still drive my overthinking, the authority figures, the coaches who berated me, and um, it's it's a lot for someone who's just like people come into my office. My daughter's like, who is that? Like, what is that? And it's interesting. I really deflect with her because like I don't want to. It's so much to get into, but I have tried to explain that what I just did to her in a kid friendly way.
Yeah, yeah.
That like we can address our inner demons. That dude was a demonic looking guy, right? Like we can face some of them down. I'm not saying this is the best tool for everyone, please. Like I'm just saying this worked for me.
I
If you
like
feel like
that.
it would work for you, do it. If you feel like it would be like re-traumatizing, please don't. You so just tread lightly.
Okay, so I didn't know if you like joke with your daughter, be like, "That's Uncle Earl. That's why we don't invite him to to Christmas anymore." Oh my god! Sorry, I almost made you spit out your coffee.
Yeah. No, that is nobody. That's why it's
Right.
interesting. It's like it's literally an AI generated image. So
Wow,
I thought
man.
I'd share that one.
No, that's really good. Well, it's interesting that men are so visual.
Yep.
I heard this. I heard something that was kind of like this, right? I did a really in depth Bible study. It was
Hmm.
about, and it was 2 years, and it was like a mentorship and Bible study, and it was fascinating. I just loved it, and we got on the topic. It's me and the guy who mentored me, and then there was another guy who is kind of a student of this with me. So it was just the three of us, and we started talking about like what does the devil look like? What does Satan look like?
Hmm.
And of course, me and the other guy, the student, we were like, oh, he's horribly scary. He's got horns. Like he's a monster. He's this. He's all the things that you think about, right? And our mentor was like, I used to think that too. He's like, you know what I think of him now? I'm like, no. He's like, I actually, and this is where I think the wool kind of gets pulled over our eyes. And I thought about this the way he described it. He's like, I actually think, he goes, I know where I'm going, when I pass. I'm going to heaven. Like, I've given my life to Christ, and I disciple men, and that's where I'm going. He's like, and I know that along the way, when I pass, I'm going to meet Satan, or at least God's going to show him to me. And I'm going to look at him and be like, that's him. Are you serious? That's him. And he's like, I was like, well, what do you see? He's like, I don't know. I like see this miniature, like whatever, like cute little dwarf type of a creature. Like, that's just like, yeah, it's me. And you're like, are you serious? Like that, this is what's causing all chaos and tempting
Hmm.
people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like, I never thought of it that way. He's like,
Yes.
yeah, the next time you think you're getting overpowered, visualize that. And I'm like, that's really interesting. So
Yes, but that's in line with,
yeah,
I mean, that's why you shared it. It is in line with what I'm talking about. And I think
yeah,
to go back to that question of what can someone do who doesn't necessarily have an immediate like social support is playfulness, creativity is your friend. Like you don't have to be a brilliant artist to find that. You can pick up a guitar and play badly, but if you're thinking of it as playing badly, then you're doing it for performance. Just play. Like a lot of what else is in my book is just having men put pen to paper, and starting to write or journal, and that it doesn't need to be two full pages in the morning, right?
yeah.
It can be throughout the day. That's how I write. I write throughout the day. I get thoughts that might trigger over. I get thoughts that might be, get me into a mental loop, and I put them on paper. And it's organizing. It takes the clutter, and the data shows this too. Writing by hand actually is a really powerful way of dealing with stress and anxiety. There's enough research out there for me to say that, like, with full confidence. Everyone has pen and paper. Write down some of your feelings. Don't do it for performance. This is not for anybody but for you. So if you could frame it as, I don't need to write a beautiful sonnet to talk about my woes. I could write something down that's feels like mush, but it's centering. It kind of gives you, it makes more coherent what's chaotic in your mind.
Gosh, man, I'm putting so many pieces together right now of just like things in my own life. And the reason I always share my own life is because I want guys to like maybe relate to some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So like, I'm a doer, like go, go, go. Like I'm trying to get out of this. Don't be a human doing, be a human being, then type thing. And I'm very crazy busy. 4 boys, all in sports, married, that full time. Obviously owner of this organization. And I picked up guitar, and I hired a
Right.
coach to teach me guitar. And my wife is like, how do you have bandwidth for this? And I was like, I don't know if I will. I was like, but I want to try something that just kind of gets me more into flow state. And I'm not thinking about work, and I'm not thinking about the next thing I have to do with the kids. And I'm not having, 20 people pinging me for something at once. I just want to like do something creative. And I've always wanted to learn. So I hired a coach, and I met with him actually this morning for the third time. We only had a third lesson
Awesome.
today. And he was like, hey, how's everything going? And I hit a sweet spot yesterday when I was practicing where I did exactly what you just said. I sat down with that guitar and I was like, I'm not going to be critical. I'm just going to close my eyes, and I'm just going to I'm going to strum what he taught me. And if I screw up, I screw up. I'm just going to enjoy this. I like literally made a
Yes.
conscious decision to enjoy it. And I found like, it was almost like I could compare it to like a runner's high. It's like where people like, go through the pain of running and then suddenly they feel euphoric. And I told my instructor this morning, I was like, he's like, how's it going? I was like, I actually experienced something with guitar yesterday that I've never experienced. And I told him, he's like, yep. Well, welcome to the enjoyment of it. Right. And
Yes.
I'll tell you, it was so
Yes.
therapeutic, man.
And art therapists know this, where if there's any out there listening, but you're exactly right. There is something very physical about a guitar, or piano too, and a lot of instruments. But what you're getting at is that, like, if you take out the performance element of it, and men are, you know, oftentimes are fear of feeling. something or not doing it right or not being good enough. And when teenagers pick up guitars, it's like they're trying to get the girl, right? Or maybe not
Yeah.
explicitly, but that's part of the picture, right?
Yeah.
But when you pick it up in your, let's say, 40s, it's like, and in this case, you're married and you're not trying to like show your sensitive side. You're not trying to perform that. You're doing it as a tool of emotion regulation. Actually,
Yeah.
what you're talking about,
Yeah.
it is one of the greatest tools, creativity and art, for emotion regulation, because you're doing it, as you said, just to see if I can do it, not because you're trying to show someone something. And that is, you've unlocked, I think, one of the important answers, at least that, out there when it comes to overcoming stress and anxiety, is like, find
Yeah.
whatever that is.
I love that, man. Like I guess like creativity, like I don't know, maybe I'm an idiot and I haven't really thought about it in that way. Like my 18-year-old, I came home last night and he was sitting at our counter island and he was coloring with music on. And I've never seen him really do that, especially not since he was like a kid. And here's what I did. I go, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Coloring." I go, "Is all your homework done?" Like I was just like immediately went to like, "Don't you have other important things to do?" And he's
Yeah.
like, he looked at me, he goes, "Yeah, my homework is done." I was like, "Oh," and I just like left it at that. But I'm sitting here thinking as you shared that with me, and my 17-year-old loves Legos. Like the kid will put together Legos, and I'm sitting here thinking like, what if they are doing that? I filter that through like, are you wasting time? Are you procrastinating? Might
Mm-hmm.
want to do something else.
Yes.
But maybe there's that like, they just want some emotional regulation. Never thought of it that way.
Yeah. They intuitively know.
Yeah.
It's a skill set that's inborn. It's built into us. As kids, you see them tinkering is a good word, because
Right.
like a stool to a kid, to a baby, is something to knock over and potentially injure themselves with. Everything is just, there's awe in the air with a kid. Oh my gosh, what is this? What does this do? Can I touch this? Can I? And we lose sight of that over the course of adulthood, because adulthood is superimposed with all these ideas of what we should be doing, of how we should live, and especially time is a big one. Is And so having kids is such an incredible thing, because you get to see what it's like to not have to constantly be on and next thing, and to just be wherever you are. They're the ultimate uh, uh, at being mindful
Yeah. Yeah,
and
they
being where they
are.
are when they're in play.
That's really cool, man. So we've gone over calm, it's like some breathing
Hmm.
and creativity. What else? Yeah, I know you mentioned a couple other things.
Yeah, there's probably more than we can get into here, but one of my favorite ones is like taking perspective. And I think you did have a guest on here who talked about going from a threat mindset to a challenge mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And and it's such an important tool for performance. And I encourage people to listen to that episode as well. What I'll add to that is that how you talk to yourself really matters. Like we have, I think, some around 6,000 thoughts a day. Honestly, I can't tell you how the neuroscientists figured that out, but that's what it says if you want the paper. And that inevitably we're going to get stuck on some of those thoughts, and how we talk to ourselves in the face of those thoughts really dictates how well we do. If we're going to continue stay in the cycle of overthinking, or if we're going to find a way out. And there is a psychologist out of University of Michigan. His name's Ethan Kross. He wrote a
Oh
book called
yeah.
Chatter.
Yeah.
Chatter.
He was on the show. Yeah.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a research psychologist. He's really interesting. And so I'm a clinical psychologist. So I apply um, the research science into the real world. And so what you can do is begin to think about how you refer to yourself. Like, I'm going on this podcast, right? How are you talking about yourself before you go live on the podcast, right? Like, what's the diet? Let's call it. What's the language diet that you're feeding yourself, right? Just like you would eat shitty food and feel like
Right.
shit. Well, what's your self-talk diet? And what he's found is actually talking to yourself using you, meaning like in this case, Jett, like you got this, like you've done this before. This is going to be a fun conversation. Like just do your thing. Like having that type of conversation is such a far cry from the what ifs of worry or the whys of rumination, meaning like, what if I fuck up? What if I do this wrong? What if, or the whys, well, last time, like, why did I screw up the last podcast I was on? Why did it, that's one type of diet. And the other type of diet is talking to yourself as if you are what I call an elite or you are a high potential like athlete, right? You're a coach and you're talking to yourself as if you're a high potential athlete. We talk to ourselves like, we treat ourselves, we beat ourselves up like rag dolls. We would never do that to a friend
Right.
going through a problem.
Right.
And so one of the tools to take perspective is to refer to yourself as to use the you, which is different. Because you're just like, I'm such an idiot. I'm this, I this, I this. But if you change it to you, it can be very helpful. Give you some give you some distance from the anxiety and the worry.
I
So
think in
that's one perspective thing.
his book, he calls that zooming out, right? Almost
Yeah.
as if you were sitting with yourself, having a conversation with yourself. And what would you say if you were kind of your own best friend? Like, even if you didn't view yourself that way, because if somebody came to you with the same thoughts or negativity bias or whatever else going on, you probably wouldn't speak to them nearly as cruel as you speak to yourself.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that his research lab is showing, and he may have talked about in the podcast, is doing a little bit of I'll call like healthy time traveling. He calls it like temporal distancing. It's like if you have an upcoming event you're really nervous about, you're overthinking. If you just take a moment, like close your eyes, like how will I think about this in a day from now, in a year from now, and 10 years from now? Like the anxiety begins to shrink and shrink. Like we all can look back on things that we've been anxious about in the past and be like, oh my gosh, I put a lot of effort into the threat that could come from that. And here I am. That was nothing. Or that was easy. Or I did it. Or I didn't. Even your failures you look back on and they're less catastrophic than you anticipated them to be. And so if you could put yourself in a mindset where you're just imagining like, maybe I'll be grayer, fatter, balder. And I'm looking back at this time now with, oh yeah, like how might I look at it? And it's generally with a more compassionate lens.
100%. I want to go back to what you said because it hit me like a ton of bricks. So like I view myself as someone who exercises, I eat healthy food. I don't have the healthiest thoughts. Like I actually like Twinkies and Big Macs and some large order of fries are going in there, right? So like what did you term that again?
I thought I called it thought diet.
Thought diet.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I phrase it sometimes that way. Like we're usually not aware of it when we slow down. Like, what are you telling yourself? Like, why are you being such a dickhead to yourself? Like,
Right.
is it effective?
Right.
If it is, great. I mean, probably not, but maybe it is. But if it isn't, like, let's change the channel of your inner voice a little bit. And I sort of take on, you could find a figure in your life who's been influential. If you don't have one, you could, you could choose, someone who you don't know, or a fictional character, and kind of take their steady voice on for yourself and say, like, what would my dad say? Or what would, you know, what would Tom Brady do? Like how would he talk to himself? Or like what I think it's a reframe of it that can be really powerful. To notice the thought diet as unhealthy and say, you know what, like what is going to be effective for this moment right now? Like what voice can I channel? What diet of thoughts can I take in that will actually generate positive energy or something productive?
No, I mean, you really, I mean, at least in my world, I mean, I think obviously relativity, I think is something that really hits somebody, whatever they can compare, like how this over here, this important thing over here, this is a non-negotiable, this is how I operate over here. And it's high octane fuel, whatever that is, I need to put that in my thoughts. Like I identify as somebody who eats healthy, who exercises, so physically I've got a lot of great things going on, but my mental diet is can be good, but it can also be absolutely in the trash. And like sometimes I can binge on pizza and donuts, to the point where I want to throw up. Like I'm sure I'm
Yes.
doing that. So like if we can have like that high octane fuel thought diet, that's a lot different than like I don't do this in other parts of my life. Why would I do that to my mentality?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
And it takes a lot to try to do that because in the
I'm
moment
sure.
when you're in the thick of it, and let's say depressed, it's like it's really hard to generate the energy to try that. Um, it's a little bit easier with anxiety, I think,
Yeah.
because depression is all about like loss of vitality. And I think with anxiety, it's a little bit easier of a tool to do that because you're a little bit more activated a lot of the time, I find.
Loss of vitality. And I think most men would identify, I don't want to lose vitality. Yeah. Are you still doing okay on time? I know were going a bit over.
Yeah, I have a 4 p.m., so I'm good for another 10 minutes.
Okay. The last and final thing I just want to
Hmm.
ask, because I know, by the way, thanks for really going down these roads in a deep way, because this is fascinating. Um,
Hmm.
but I want to just, as we wrap up here, I want to normalize this whole thing around, you know, men getting help, right? Whether it's therapy, whether it's coaching, whether it's community, whether it's friendship, whatever, but we go so far inward, and we don't, we think it's weak. We think it's terrible. Like,
Yes.
real quick thing here is my kid was asking me, because I hire a coach every single year, or I go to a therapist here and there, just to sort things out. And my son is like, "Do you ever feel bad about going to therapy?" And I was like, "No, never. Why?" And I used to. And he's like,
Yeah.
"Well, why not?" And I said, "Because I don't have the luxury of time. I don't want to screw around with this. Like, I want to get to the
Yes.
bottom of it as quickly as I can so I can get through it and get on to the next thing. Like, I don't want to waste any more mental bandwidth on this." So, but it took me a long time to get there.
Hmm.
And I think that it's still not normalized.
Yes. There's probably still a part of you that's like pushes up against it,
A little bit.
buried in there.
Yeah.
I
Like,
mean, I said,
yeah, there's a part of me that's like, why do I need this? Is this a
yeah,
waste of time or money? And it never is. But yeah, there's a small part of me that still questions it here and there.
yeah. I mean, help seeking is one of the things I think is changing. I think more, well, factually, more men are going into therapy and coaching and these things than ever before. What I'm worried about as a therapist, and what you might see or not as a coach, is that in my case, therapy itself isn't as welcoming to men. Meaning that if you do the thing and you get yourself into therapy, I used to work in the VA system, and I'd see in the medical charts a lot like loss to follow up. There's a lot of men veterans, so you see disproportionate number of men in therapy there, and you see in the charts like loss to follow up, meaning that these are people who have tried, they have come through your door, someone's door, and like it didn't work out. And there's some data show that about 55% of men who leave therapy is because they just they didn't feel the bond there. They felt like their therapist wasn't getting them. And I do think it is important looking ahead to start thinking about how we as therapists design spaces and create spaces that are welcoming to men and where therapy works. So now that we start to see more getting through the door that are pushing through what you're talking about, that help seeking um, block, like what are we going to do when we get there? We can't, like, we have to take a gender sensitive approach. And I've thought a lot about that because it's really important that you build a strong bond in the very beginning. We call it a working alliance, which means you just, a strong bond, but you're collaborative and you agree on the goals and the tasks of what psychotherapy would be. That's one of the most important parts of psychotherapy. And I think men get lost in that alliance building part and they say, just kind of like, screw it. Like, this isn't not working. It doesn't, it's an alien experience to me. And like, I don't foresee this working. And so one of my missions will be to try to create a space that works, and that, because you go in for one session, that's not therapy. That's not coaching.
Right.
Like, so that initial phase is so important. And I do think a lot about it, how to build stronger relationships with men who traditionally wouldn't be in therapy, because that's what we're seeing now, right? Like guys who would never in a million years do it, say, okay, I'll give it a shot. I know this guy who's doing it or he's doing it. Um, and my pitch to someone who's reluctant to seek help is that this can be an unpoliced place for you to make sense of your inner life. Like, and that's so cool. You can't get that necessarily from a friend or a family member, whether it's coaching or therapy. That idea that like you can say almost everything. This is not a cocktail party. Like we might call you out on things, we might talk things through, but like you're not going to be rejected. We're going to work through a lot of some of the toughest, muckiest stuff there is. And then we're going to leave and we're going to come back and we're not friends.
I love that, man. I didn't really understand that until I started coaching myself, that even like in therapy in years past, and I've been doing this for 10 years, but before that, it was even like therapists that I would see, I would still hide behind like a veil. I wouldn't tell them everything. And now, that I have my own clients, and my own clients were like, "You probably never heard this one." I was like, I probably have. And like I mean, I've heard some of the most extreme things, as I'm sure you have. And now that I know that I've been in your seat, and I see a coach now, and I see a therapist every now and again, and now I go in there knowing like this person, like I am, whatever I'm going to tell them, it's not like they haven't heard it before. And by the way, the more honest I am with them and just everything, the faster they're going to help me. So
Yes.
I think it takes us dudes a while to get there, but you're right. I mean, like, I think we kind of go in like, well, what if this situation is like, what if I freak this person out, or they've never heard this
There you
before?
go.
Chances are they've heard it all, and you're not going to
Yes.
freak them out. Right.
Yes. And I think he's your friend, Connor Beaton, had an episode where he was talking about one of the things that goes wrong is therapists who struggle with the intensity, is the way that he phrased it, of um, emotion that men bring to the table. And it's very true, is that there is intense, oftentimes rage that I deal with working with men. And then there's intense withdrawal in the opposite extreme too, that you have to be adept at dealing with. And so a patient or client who walks in needs to know that you can handle them, and
Right.
that's part of making a welcoming space for men in therapy. So that's a good point.
Yeah. Man, thanks for giving me some extra time here. I could probably talk to you for another hour, but I know you don't have
Yeah,
that,
it's fun.
and neither do I, but this was awesome. I want to make sure the guys, if any guy is listening right now and he's like, man, like Jett's my dude. Like, I think I'd like to contact him, see about him or your book. What's the best way
Hmm.
for men to follow you, connect, grab your book?
So my book is available on most bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. So search "Quiet Your Mind: A Men's Guide." Um, I do have an Instagram handle at flex.flexibility. I'm working that, trying to work out my social media game best I can. And my website is Jett Stone, PhD, JettStone, PhD.com. And so you could also reach out through that channel as well.
Well, I so appreciate you coming on, man. I'd welcome a part two at any point in time, just to go down the
Would
rabbit
love
hole a
to.
little more. But this was awesome. And gents, you can find all the links for Jett. If you go to thedadedge.com/525 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/525. Everything that we mentioned in the show, all of Jett's links as well as all of ours, they'll be in there for you. Dude, from my heart to yours, from the bottom of my heart, thank you I feel like we really unpacked a ton here, and I'm super excited that we did.
I had a great time. It was a really good conversation.
Same here, brother. Thank you.